The comeback the world's been waiting for finally happened. The second she stepped through that curtain, Twitter exploded, the arena went crazy, and history was made. She's back. It wasn't just a sound. It was a physical force, a roar that started deep in the chests of 20,000 people and erupted into something elemental, something that shook the steel rafters and vibrated through the television screens of millions around the globe. For 7 years, there had been whispers, rumors, and grainy fan videos of supposed sightings. 7 years of a ghost haunting the industry she had built, a name spoken with a mixture of reverence and regret. But ghosts don't cast shadows, and they certainly don't command a spotlight like this. Her music hit, that iconic, unforgettable opening chord. And for a split second, there was a collective intake of breath. Disbelief. Was this real? Was this a trick, a tribute, a cruel joke played on a fan base that had never truly let go? Then she emerged from the tunnel. The silhouette alone was enough. Time seemed to stop and stretch all at once. The camera flashes became a single blinding strobe light, and the sound of the crowd became a solid wall of pure, unadulterated emotion. This wasn't just a wrestler returning to a ring. This was a cultural icon stepping back into the light, reclaiming a throne that had sat empty for nearly a decade. In that single moment, every championship, every rivalry, every soul-stirring speech came rushing back. The world wasn't just watching a comeback, it was witnessing a resurrection, and the noise they made was their prayer of thanks. Before the commentary team could even form a coherent sentence, the internet was already ablaze. The name, her name, wasn't just trending. It had shattered the very concept of a trend. It was a global takeover. Every corner of the digital world, from sports blogs to political news feeds, was flooded with 3 simple words: she's back. The servers at Twitter headquarters reportedly struggled to keep up with the sheer volume of traffic, a tidal wave of shock, joy, and raw, unfiltered nostalgia. Old highlight reels, once relegated to the dusty archives of fan forums, were being shared and replayed at a rate that defied algorithms. Memes were born and died within minutes, unable to keep pace with the velocity of the moment. News outlets, caught completely off guard, scrambled to publish articles with frantic, all-caps headlines, their carefully planned content calendars for the night rendered instantly irrelevant. This was no longer a niche story for wrestling fans. It was a global phenomenon. In living rooms, bars, and bedrooms across continents, phones were lighting up with messages from friends and family, all asking the same question: are you seeing this? The comeback wasn't just an event, it was a digital earthquake, with its epicenter in that arena, but its aftershocks felt in every pocket of the connected world. The internet didn't just break. It was remade in her image, if only for one unforgettable night. The world had moved on, they said. She was a relic of a bygone era, they claimed. They were wrong. While the world outside roared, a different kind of storm was brewing backstage. A quiet, cold, and heavy one. As she walked back through the curtain, the thunderous applause of the arena faded, replaced by an unnerving, palpable silence. The usual chaos of the backstage area, technicians shouting, producers rushing with headsets, wrestlers warming up, had ceased. Everyone just watched. A few familiar faces, veterans from her era, offered a respectful nod or a quiet handshake, their eyes filled with a weary understanding. But it was the eyes of the new generation that told the real story, the ones who had built their careers in the void she had left behind. They didn't see a returning hero. They saw a ghost who had come to reclaim a house they now considered theirs. Their stares were not of awe, but of assessment, of resentment. Every smile she received felt rehearsed. Every pat on the back felt hollow. She was a legend, yes, but she was also a disruption. A beautifully chaotic bomb dropped right in the middle of their carefully constructed ecosystem. The air was thick with unspoken questions. Why now? What did she want? And who among them would have to step aside? In the celebratory chaos that the world was witnessing on their screens, The most telling reaction was the one that wasn't televised, the chilling professional silence of those who now stood in her shadow. This wasn't a homecoming. It was an invasion. Later that night, long after the crowds had dispersed and the trucks were being loaded, she was summoned to an office. The room was dimly lit, smelling of old leather and stale coffee. Seated behind a large mahogany desk was a man who had been a permanent fixture in the industry since before she was born. The promoter. He wasn't angry. In fact, he looked tired, his face a roadmap of countless triumphs and betrayals. He gestured for her to sit, the silence stretching on for a long moment before he finally spoke. His voice was a low, gravelly hum. "That was quite a sound out there," he began, "but noise fades." He warned her that the business she had left was not the one she had returned to. The locker room wasn't a den of rivals anymore. It was a pit of entrepreneurs, each one a brand, a CEO of their own destiny. "They don't want to share the spotlight," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "They want to own it." He spoke of the narrative, the story she thought she could control. He told her that the fans' love was fickle, a fire that needed constant feeding. The moment she faltered, the moment the nostalgia wore off, they would turn. "You're not just fighting the person across the ring from you anymore," he cautioned, leaning forward. "You're fighting your own ghost. And ghosts, my dear, have a perfect record. They never lose." The morning after was a battlefield. The media, having caught its breath, now began the work of deconstructing the miracle. The narrative instantly fractured into two opposing camps. On one side, the purists and sports historians celebrated it as the greatest return in entertainment history. They ran segments with montages of her greatest moments, set to soaring orchestral music. Commentators spoke of her with a poetic reverence, framing her as a prodigal daughter returning to save the very industry she had perfected. They called her a trailblazer, a visionary, a once-in-a-lifetime talent whose absence had created a wound that could finally begin to heal. But on the other side, a darker narrative began to bubble to the surface. Investigative journalists and contrarian podcasters started asking the questions no one wanted to hear. Why did she really leave? They dredged up the old controversies, the rumors of backstage ultimatums, the spectacular and public burnout that had precipitated her exile. They painted her not as a hero, but as a cautionary tale. A brilliant but volatile force who had fled when the pressure became too great. Suddenly the world wasn't just talking about her return. They were debating her entire legacy. Was she the savior, or was she the villain of her own story? The internet, which had been united in its joy just hours before, was now a vicious civil war of opinions. The comeback was perfect. The aftermath was anything but. Her phone buzzed, displaying a name she hadn't seen in months. Dad. She stepped away from the whirlwind of producers and agents, finding a quiet corner in a concrete hallway. Taking a deep breath, she answered. The voice on the other end wasn't celebratory. It was quiet, heavy with a familiar weariness. "Your mother and I saw it on the news," he said, the words hanging in the air. There was no "congratulations," no "we're so proud," just a statement of fact. She could hear the unasked question in his silence. "Why are you doing this again?" She tried to explain the feeling, the roar of the crowd, the sense of purpose, but her words felt thin, inadequate. He cut her off, not with anger, but with a quiet, heartbreaking reminder. "We remember the last time," he said softly. "We remember the phone calls at 3 a.m., the missed birthdays, the holidays you spent in a hospital bed on the other side of the world. We remember watching our daughter disappear, piece by piece, until all that was left was the character she played on TV." He wasn't trying to be cruel. He was reminding her of the cost. The price of that fame, of that adoration, was paid not just by her but by them. As the world celebrated the return of their icon, her family was quietly mourning the potential loss of their daughter all over again. The call ended, and she stood alone, the cheers from the night before ringing hollow in her ears. Miles away, in a sterile hotel room, the current champion watched the comeback on a laptop. She didn't fast forward or skip through the commercials. She watched every second, from the first note of the music to the final shot of the legend standing triumphant in the ring. Her face was a mask of calm, betraying nothing. Her entourage, a small circle of trainers and confidants, buzzed around the room, furious on her behalf. They spoke of disrespect, of their champion being overshadowed, of how this comeback had completely stolen her moment. The champion heard them, but her eyes never left the screen. She wasn't watching a rival. She was studying a legend. She analyzed the way she walked, the way she connected with the crowd, in the effortless command she held over millions. This wasn't anger, it was something far more dangerous. Respect. When the clip ended, she finally closed the laptop. The room fell silent, waiting for her to erupt. Instead, she stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city lights below. "Good," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The room was confused. "Good?" her manager asked. The champion turned, and for the first time, a small, cold smile touched her lips. "I've beaten everyone," she said. "I've run out of opponents. But you can't be the best of your generation until you've destroyed the best of the last one." Her reign wasn't being threatened. It was finally being legitimized. The following week, the arena was electric once more. The legend stood in the middle of the ring, a microphone in her hand, trying to explain her return to a sea of adoring fans. Before she could finish her first sentence, a different theme song hit. The champion emerged, not with a swagger, but with the focused, deliberate pace of a predator. She walked to the ring, the championship belt gleaming on her shoulder, and stood face to face with the icon. The crowd roared, expecting a war of words, a torrent of insults. But the champion did something no one expected. She took the microphone and smiled. "Thank you," she said, her voice clear and calm, silencing the entire arena. "On behalf of everyone in that locker room and everyone in this new era, I want to thank you. Thank you for building this house." The legend looked on, confused. The champion continued, her tone turning icy. "You built it, and then you abandoned it. You left the keys on the table and you walked away. And we stayed. We renovated. We made it stronger. We made it better." She took a step closer, their faces just inches apart. "So you can have your welcome back party. You can have your moment. But make no mistake, you are a guest here. The only thing you have that I want is your ending. I don't want to beat you. I want to retire you. For good." A week later, a special sit-down interview aired. It was an intimate setting, designed to get past the sound bites and reveal the person behind the persona. The interviewer, a seasoned journalist known for his disarming approach, navigated through the predictable questions about ring rust and championship aspirations. Then he paused, looked her directly in the eye, and asked the one question the whole world was wondering. "We've talked about the career, but let's talk about the person. 7 years is a long time. Why did you really come back?" The question hung in the air. The rehearsed answers about unfinished business and loving the fans seemed to evaporate from her mind. Her confident facade finally cracked. Her gaze drifted away from the interviewer, somewhere into the distance, as if looking back in time. Her voice, when she spoke, was softer, stripped of all its bravado. "Before I left," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I made a promise. To my younger brother. He was sick. Very sick. He made me promise that if he didn't make it, I would one day go back and win the big one, just one more time. For him. So he could watch from wherever he is." Tears welled in her eyes. "He was my biggest fan. He believed in me even when I didn't. I didn't come back for the money or the fame. I came back to keep a promise." The internet-breaking comeback wasn't about glory. It was a pilgrimage, an act of love and remembrance. The story ends not on the grand stage, but in the quiet aftermath. Weeks have passed. The initial shockwave of her return has settled into the rhythm of the weekly shows. She has won, she has lost, she has bled. The comeback is no longer a moment, it's a grind. We see her now, after a grueling main event. The arena is empty, dark, save for a single ghost light illuminating the center of the ring. The cleanup crew moves around her like shadows. She doesn't head for the locker room. Instead, she slowly climbs the steel steps and sits on the edge of the canvas, her body bruised, her face etched with exhaustion. The roar is gone. The cameras are off. It's just her, the silence, and the ghosts. The narrator's voice returns, soft and reflective. We thought this story was about us, about our nostalgia, about a viral moment that united the world. We thought it was about championships and legacies, but we were wrong. As she sits there, her gaze isn't fixed on the empty seats or the Titantron. It's fixed on the heavens. The camera pans up, through the steel rafters, past the stadium lights, and settles on the moon, hanging bright in the night sky. The comeback that broke the internet was never meant for the internet at all. It was never for the millions watching. It was for an audience of one, and she was still fighting to give him the best seat in the house.